Hello everybody, welcome to my favourite day of the race weekend. When it comes to videos, it's inside the tape, where I give you a little bit more detail and a little bit more description about the track, and we'll do a little bit of comparison, line choice comparison with that fantastic ghosting, which is, tell you what, it's going to be good this weekend because there's a couple of sections I don't know which line to take. Someone nearly died, and I want to find out what line's best. So, let me give you a full description of the track, starting from the top. So, you go out the start gate and you dive left down into the trees. Quite narrow, there's some roots there, but they're all quite dry at the moment, so they don't cause any issues. Really narrow turns where the line that you have to hit is only a tire width wide, so you've got to be precise. And you come out into the open and the track splits. It goes right instead of what you would expect, left off the drop, because the left drop line is going to be used for round two. So we go right and we go into the trees. It's super narrow, it wiggles a little bit, so if you can ride up onto the roots, you can straighten out that section. Then you go into nice berms and then the track splits again. This is line choice though, not track 1 and 2. So the left line, got some big compressions and then it filters you out of the trees. It's nice, but it's a little bit harder to do. The right line is narrower on the way in, really tight on your handlebars against the tree on the left and the right. But once you're onto it, it's super smooth, leaves you a nice gap out, which sets you up perfectly for the next berm. After that, nice fast drag across the piste where you can give your hands a little rest before you get into the kind of free-ridey bermy section. Some nice berms that are really hard pack on the first two. And the third one is getting a big old hole in it, a big left-hand rut in it, and it's a little bit sketchy, so riders have started insiding that corner. So they're inside in that corner now for most people, and then you get the big old slingshot through the goalpost tree gap, which seems so sketchy when we walked it, but it's actually super chill. What is a bit more sketchy is right after it, there's two step downs that are on a turn, and first couple of runs, it was hard to judge the speed for. But it's absolutely fine now. You just a little bit of a brake check for them so you don't go too deep. Then after that was some big meaty compressions that you've got to watch out you don't go too fast into, otherwise you'll start hitting up slopes before you get to the really cool feature, which is this big natural rock which you can roll along and drop off, or you can hit the upslope right at the starting gap, over it and into the downslope into the open. Super cool. After that, big right hand corner with a few different lines. There's a straight inside line, or you can set up wide and then also cut into the inside line, just makes the corner a little bit wider. Or there's a low line, which to be honest, if you're there you've made a mistake, because it's a long way out, it's not very supportive, and it doesn't set you up good for the next super transfer gap. So coming off that inside line, big transfer gap, the speed for this is critical. If you go too fast and pull too hard, you will have an issue. A very big issue. So first few laps, what people are doing, they're hitting the very tip of the lip to come in at a cruisy pace and just float over, because when the landing's really steep, you want to be going a little bit slower. It has less potential of causing you big issues. But as you go faster, this big spiky part of the lip can send you too far. So riders start moving slightly to the left where the lip is lower, and it allows them to go faster and not get sent as far. Still very hard to get right. After that you land heavy on the brakes, trying to scrub the speed, hold the off-camera high line into a really flat left. It's super hard to get nice. Then after that, you set up high for the next turn, and there's a few different line choices here. The main line, it works, but there's a high line where you can gap in over a stone to set up wide for the next left. Over a stone, big berm, and then into another bit of multi-line choice where most people are on the same line now. So you set up super wide and then fully inside the next two turns. And then we get to the first section we're going to ghost. So let's ghost this section to see which one is fastest. I have a funny feeling that inside is going to be quicker because not many people were doing the outside, but let's check. So we've got Andrew Driscoll doing the outside and we've got Jacob Dewitt on the inside. So they come into the section looking nice and even, and you can see Jacob heading towards that inside line as Andrew gaps into the outside. But already you can see Jacob is in the lead. So is that outside berm going to carry more speed? Here comes Andrew. So he's going to have to be shifting to make up all this distance. And as they zoom down into those corners, Jacob is holding it. And he gets to the finish and he's 0.31 faster. Let's see if it's the same for the girls. We've got Miriam Nicole, who was fastest in qualifying by quite a lot, and she's on the inside line. And we've got Valley Hull, who does the outside. So coming into this section, it is neck and neck as you would expect, and then Valley is swinging out to that outside, and she gaps into it, gets some big air, ooh, tags that rock, which is definitely going to slow her down. Miriam's pulling ahead, she is putting bike lengths into Valley, but Valley, she's not that far behind, but it's going to be so tricky to carry the speed to keep up with Miriam, because Miriam was not slow around that inside line. And coming down to the finish, that inside is taking it. It's 0.63 to Miriam. From the riders that we saw and filmed, that inside is looking fastest. After that, we got some berms, just trying to set up nicely for them, commit to them, keeping your weight centered, carrying the speed, and you get on the gas, long flat section. Pedal as much as you feel you can, because you want to be going fast. And we've got one of the hardest corners on the track that you really, really want to carry the speed on. Is like a little slight left crest. And the reason it's so difficult is because there's no support to it, and your landing zone is like a tire width wide. If you're off a little bit either side, you'll hit a rock and slip and just lose all your momentum. So it's super hard to get nice. After that, you're just pumping, trying to stay away from any harsh edges, harsh rocks, carrying the speed along this kind of almost uphill straight before things start to get really, really loose and chunky. So coming into this rocky section, there's a few lines here. There is an outside line round the rocks. It's a long way round, but there's not as many loose rocks on it, and it's got a little bit more support to it. This inside line, obviously more direct, and it also allows you to filter onto a slightly more inside line between the trees that leads you into the next drop. Just more direct line. You can also go between the trees from the wider line. It has the potential of carrying more speed in, because that inside, there's lots of loose rocks and there's nothing you can really push in off to really get onto that inside line. So potentially swinging in from the outside could work, but it does seem like the worst of both worlds. But we'll see when we do the comparison. So most riders on this section were taking the outside line as it was the easier line to do. So we're going to compare a few on that outside, because execution is super important. So we've got Mark Wallace doing the outside and Danny Hart also doing it, but with some slight variances. Let's go to them and see what the difference is. So they're both coming into the section, and Danny is already pulling ahead. He must have come into this section so much quicker coming through the turn, but it looks like Mark is actually catching him up. So it's neck and neck. You can see Danny lets it run wide. His front wheel slips a little, stalling his speed, and here comes Mark. He's catching him. Mark goes wider over that rock before the pad, and at the finish, super close, 0.09. So that was really interesting to see those slight differences there. Let's go with the only true comparison of inside versus outside that we got, and that is Forrest Riesco on the inside line, getting it nice and clean, and Dakota Norton on the outside, railing it right round that longest route. And coming in, and again, the entrance speed is really standing out. So Dakota going into that wide line, he's got less to think about and he just motors in at high speed. But Forrest is on that inside and it is much shorter, but is it going to be enough to catch up? And then coming up to the end, Dakota is still in the lead, but Forrest is super close, and at the finish, it's 0.037 to Dak. But I reckon if Riesco could get into that inside as fast as Dak did, it could be super close. Finally, as is tradition, we'll compare the fastest two we filmed through this section, and that is Danny Hart on the outside and Dakota Norton on the outside. Let's see who takes it. Flying into this section, they're both looking much more even than the other comparisons, so they were both coming into this super fast, and it's looking really even. Dakota and Danny are even, but Danny's pulling ahead. He must have let off the brakes a bit more in that turn to carry more speed. But he does slip a little there. It might allow Dak to catch up before they get to this rock. It's not looking like it though, and Danny takes it by 0.015. super tight. So it is all about execution, guys. Line choice isn't always the be all and end all. But at the drop, there's some options as well. The angle you go off of it is an option. If you preload and try and lift the bike up over it, if you can even sneak around the outside of it, there's like on the right hand side of the stone, it's lower, doesn't kick you as much. You can potentially carry more speed around it, and it makes the next turn wider. On the next turn, over the rock, there's an inside line that most people are doing. The outside one, it's no support, it's a long way around. If you get on that, you've made a mistake. So you are doing that inside line and then dropping off and down into the next section. This is the bit I'm confused about, because I find dropping over the rock to be really, really hard to precisely get right, to get your speed right, to get your angle right, very challenging. And it's a big hit you've got to take. So the wider line is a little bit less physical on the body, and I feel like it's easier, but I don't think it's faster. Then after that, we go down super steep, steepest section of the track. Really loose here. There's a couple options where you can hold high, more direct, or there's a slightly lower line that you can swing you up for the turn. And then you hit some bam berms that honestly it's just, you're just happy to get to. You're happy to get to them because they're going to hold you, because that steep section is so steep you feel like you're just speeding up the whole way to the corners. And after that, some slight crest that you're got to be really careful with the traction and your braking, because there's little rocks in there that just a little bit damp and can slip you. There's a really direct line you can take where you gap into a corner, and if you get it nice, it feels amazing. You rail around the turn. And a couple little options where you can just choose to be a foot to the left or the right to miss some rocks over some compressions, and you have to really haul on the anchors, like haul on the anchors, almost stop, to then drop into a right-hander. It's really easy to overshoot that one. And after that we get to, I mean it's been rocky up to now, but we get to the really rocky, harsh section of the track. It's a left-hand turn, and then you get into this slightly off-camber rocks. When they're dry, they're hard, but if it rains, which it might, they are like, it's almost impossible to ride. So right at the moment we're having a good time because it's riding not too bad. So through these rocks, carrying the momentum, there's a bit of line choice where there used to be a low and a high line. Most people are on the high now just because it's got a nicer arc to it. You don't have to turn as sharp. Then rattling down slightly off camber straight into the gnarliest drop, where once you go in race pace, you land way past the sweet spot of the landing. You just land in some more chunk and you just got to brace for impact. And down the next section, you're just trying to stay on your line, stay relaxed and stay off the brakes and carry the speed. Then down into the final rock garden, there's a new line that's kind of developed towards the end of it where you can go wide, and it's a little bit easier to do, but I don't think it's as fast. So it depends how fit and strong you are. So I'm probably going to go round because I'm not as fit and strong. So down this bottom section, it's really critical you get this last turn really nicely, because it's the last place for carrying speed down onto the flat sprint. Onto the last pedal, give it everything you've got, because it's the last pace you really need to put some effort in. Stay low, stay out of the wind, and carry the speed down into those bottom jumps. So the bottom jumps, there's a big old triple, which feels mint, even though it's absolutely huge. Final turns, there used to be a whale tail. I guess it's now just like the whale carcass. And it's just a big tabletop. You've got to get that corner really nice, pedal as hard as you can, float it over, zoom on down, finish. Easy. Easy. Not easy. So a really challenging track, but a really good one. I hope you enjoyed Inside the Tape today. I've been Ben Cathro. Hopefully I qualified. I've not been successful so far, but I feel like we're getting closer each time. So yeah, hopefully we got it. Thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned for Story of the Race tomorrow and round 6 in a few days. We'll see you then.